Have you ever thought about, like, just totally normal everyday stuff and why it is the way it is?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Like, why do clocks go clockwise? We
Mhm.
never even think about it. It's just the way it is. But, like, why?
Yeah, it's so ingrained, you never stop and question it.
Right. So today we're going to find out why, and we've got some awesome insights from Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Love him.
I know, me too. He makes everything make sense.
Yeah, he's great at explaining those big, complex.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're going to dive into one of his Star Talk segments where he breaks down this whole clockwise thing. And trust me, it's fascinating.
Awesome.
We're talking astronomy,
Yeah.
a little bit of history, geography. I mean, get ready for a wild ride.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, so first things first, we got to understand how the sun moves across the sky.
Right. So imagine you're standing on the equator.
Yeah?
What's really cool is that every single day, the sun rises due east and sets due west, like clockwork.
Makes sense. Super straightforward.
It is. And it passes directly overhead around noon. So it's a very direct east-west path.
Okay. But obviously most of us aren't living on the equator.
Yeah.
So how does that change things?
Right. That's where it gets interesting. If you're in the northern hemisphere, let's say New York City, for example, the sun's path is a little different.
Okay.
Instead of going directly overhead, it kind of arcs across the southern part of the sky.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And what Tyson points out is that if you're facing the sun in the northern hemisphere, you're actually never facing true north.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, it's kind of subtle, but it's a really cool thing to think about.
It is. And it makes me think about, like, you know how moss grows on the north side of trees?
Yeah, classic nature trivia.
Right, because that side never gets direct sunlight. So it's like
Yeah.
the sun's path leaves these clues all over the place.
Exactly, and in the southern hemisphere, it's the opposite. Moss would grow on the south side because the sun's path is flipped.
Gotcha. So now with that image in mind, the sun in the northern hemisphere rising in the east, moving across the south, setting in the west.
Ah.
Let's talk about sundials.
Ah, yes, sundials, our ancient timekeeping friends.
Exactly. And, importantly, they were developed in the northern hemisphere.
Which, as Tyson points out, is where a lot of early technology was developed.
Right. So let's break down a sundial. What are we looking at here?
So basically, you've got this flat surface with markings for the hours,
Okay.
and then there's this part that sticks up. It casts a shadow. Tyson just calls it a stick, but the real word is gnomon. Gnomon.
Nomen. Got it.
As the sun moves, this gnomon throws a shadow, and the position of the shadow on the markings tells you what time it is.
Simple yet brilliant.
Right. And it's worth noting that these were designed for specific latitudes. A sundial made for Egypt wouldn't work perfectly in England because the sun's angle is different.
Right, of course. Because
Yeah.
the earth is curved and all that.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
now here's the key. How does that moving shadow connect to the whole clockwise thing we see on clocks today?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Right. So as the sun rises in the east and moves across the south toward the west in the northern hemisphere, that shadow from the gnomon moves in a specific direction on the sundial.
And that direction is...
Clockwise.
Whoa. It all comes back to the sundial.
It does. It's all connected. Think about it. The sun moves east to west above the sundial, so the shadow it casts moves in a circle below in one specific direction.
Mind blown. So the sun's movement determined the direction of the shadow on the earliest clocks.
Yep. Pretty cool, huh?
Totally. So then we get to mechanical clocks, and they obviously weren't just invented out of nowhere.
Right. People were already used to sundials, so
Yeah.
it makes sense that those early clocks were designed to mimic what people already understood.
So basically, they just took the sundial idea and mechanized it.
Exactly. As Tyson puts it, our clocks are emulated sundials, like they're adaptations of that ancient technology.
Fascinating. So the hands on those new mechanical clocks were moving in the same direction as the shadow on a sundial.
Yep, it wasn't random. It was a direct carryover.
Clockwise was already the language of time even back then.
Exactly.
Oh.
And here's where Tyson gets really interesting. He says if civilization had started in the southern hemisphere where the sun moves differently.
Oh, yeah, because it would be going north instead of south.
Exactly. He says sundials there would have had shadows moving in the opposite direction.
So clocks would run counterclockwise.
Potentially. Yeah. It's a mind-bending thought experiment.
It really is.
Yeah.
And he actually has a counterclockwise clock in his office, right?
He does. He even described it as creepy and trippy.
That's hilarious, even though it tells time perfectly fine.
It does. But it just feels wrong because it goes against everything we're used to.
Right, like our brains are hardwired for clockwise.
Totally. It really shows how much of what we think is normal is actually just based on where and when we live.
For sure. But then Tyson brings up the digital age, which is a whole other layer to this.
Right, because with digital clocks, we lose that visual representation of time.
It's just numbers changing on a screen.
Exactly. Tyson points out that we used to talk about time in fractions of a circle, half past, quarter, till.
Yeah, we still say that.
We do, but we don't really picture that circular division anymore.
Right. You don't see that quarter of the clock face when you just see 0.15 on your phone.
Exactly. Time becomes less about geometry and more about just numbers.
It's way more abstract.
Yeah. And he also talks about this idea of unnecessary precision.
Like how digital clocks give you the exact minute down to the second.
Right. You might say it's 12.33, when really around 12.30 would have been fine.
Because the technology gives us that level of detail, so we use it.
It changes how we think about and communicate time. And then there's the whole synchronizing watches thing that Tyson brought up, like in heist movies.
Oh, yeah. That feels so old school now.
It does, and that's because with smartphones and GPS, we don't need to do that anymore.
We're all synced up automatically.
Right. That classic movie scene of everyone setting their watches together is totally outdated now.
Think like a relic of the past.
It is, Tyson called it an antiquated prehistoric moment.
I love that. And it's because our devices are constantly updating and syncing via satellite.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's crazy how fast that became normal.
And he mentioned that those old mechanical watches weren't even that accurate.
Yeah, they'd gain or lose minutes over the course of a day, so you had to keep syncing them.
Makes sense. Then he went on to talk about those old sea chronometers.
Oh, yeah. Those were so important for navigation back in the day.
And they were super precise for the time, but even they would drift a little.
Right. And instead of constantly adjusting them, sailors would use a correction formula.
It's like they embraced the imperfection.
In a way, yeah. They worked with the technology they had.
So different from our world today where everything has to be perfect and instant.
Totally. It's fascinating to see how much things have changed.
So we've gone from the sun's path to ancient sundials to mechanical clocks to digital clocks and even counterclockwise ones.
What a journey.
It really is. And it all goes back to that basic observation of the sun's movement and how our ancestors turned that into a way to tell time.
It's amazing how something so simple led to something so fundamental.
Right. And as we wrap up this deep dive, it makes you think
Oh, what?
about how much our understanding of time has changed and how much it'll probably keep changing.
Makes you wonder what people in the future will think of our technology.
Right. Like what will seem totally outdated or even primitive to them.
What are we taking for granted now that they'll laugh at?
That's the big question. It's something to ponder, for sure.
Definitely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Absolutely. It's been a blast exploring this with you.